Welcome to G3, Games, Gadgets, and Guests, a video podcast from 702 Communications. I'm your host, Brian Crommett. We're here again at Replay Games. If you've been watching, you've known that we were going to shoot a couple here at Replay Games with Cassidy Schnase. And he's having us back here today, and we are talking about gadgets. Because, of course, if you're going to have a big game store, you're going to have a couple gadgets that we're going to have to talk about in this store as well. So some of the just interesting things that in our first meeting that popped out at us were you've got some deconstructed games here. So talk to me about these deconstructed games.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we're having an issue right now with what we're calling basically the illegal reproduction market. China has been really good at copying games and selling them for cheap, but from a collecting standpoint, we don't want to purchase those because we'd rather have original, you know, what was intended by Nintendo. And so we got a couple different things here where this was an illegal Mario Party game that showed up. And it's easy to see that the battery holder here is wrong because it should be soldered on. It shouldn't be a holder holding that board battery there. The board is also laser cut. It's very straight and narrow, where there should be what's called break-off tabs that you'll see on a real game. That it was mass produced so that it was an assembly line kind of thing, and they just snap them off of each other. And then you can see that this battery was soldered on. The other thing that's also noted here is, you know, for copyright infringement, they don't do it, but there's no Nintendo on here. Whereas you'll see the Nintendo on here, it's actually behind the battery there. So, but So easy to spot once you open up the game, but then it was one of those things that, you know, as soon as I held this cartridge, the plastic feels different. It doesn't have that same soft touch that the normal 64 cartridge does. So, but it's one of those unfortunate things that has hit the Fargo area, but, you know, we're aware of it and we're not going to sell that in our store. Just because we know that it's not fair to the community to try to, you know, ethically sell that kind of thing as a real thing.
And so, I mean, the game plays, but you are playing a pirated game, right? I mean, that's the real thing. So that is something that, you know, I don't know that people, when they're shopping for vintage games, you know, they even think about that. They go on Amazon or eBay or whatever to that secondary market, and they're looking for their title, and, well, I could get it at this shop, you know, for X, and I can get it from this person I've never heard of for 25% of that. Well, I'm going to buy that, but that could very well be.
Exactly, and that's a good thing to mention too, because you'll see that on eBay especially, where it's like Mario Party is normally around 25, 30 bucks for the game, and you'll see sellers for $10, and they'll have like 15 of them available. And it's like, okay, well, red flag number one. Red flag number two is you'll see Hong Kong as the distribution from. So it's fortunate that some of them do say that they are reproduced games, but then there's a lot of them that try to just slyly pass it along as the real thing. So, but then, like you said, you know, it's that red flag. If this game normally runs $200 and they're selling it for $25, you know, there should be something there to say about that, which is fun because when people come into the store, if they want to, you know, even though we verify them, we have the tools available that they can come and open up a game and see that it's the real thing. So, just because we want to open and honest with them. So,
No, I think that's great. And like I say, this wasn't even something that was on my radar, honestly. The pirated cartridges, you know, wasn't even something that I was aware of as a problem, especially in Fargo. So that's really interesting, and it's good to know, you know, that that's something that you are aware of, and so all of the cartridges and games that you've got stacked on the shelves here for people to buy, those are authentic. And for
especially the more rare games, we do our best to clean them up and stuff like that. Even with the CD-based stuff, we have a professional resurfacer that we can run it through to take care of the light scratching and stuff like that. And even some of the deeper scratches, and, you know, there's only, you get to a point where you destroy the data.
Point of no return.
But, you know, if it's like you had no game to start with and you had no game to end with, you know, we can at least try. So,
sure. Sounds good. So there's one thing about Replay Games that maybe is something that's going to drive you in here is just that you know that what you're buying here is authentic, that you know if you're buying, you know, from Cassidy here that you're not going to be playing a pirated game, and if that's important to you, come on and see him.
And I'm not perfect, and I know that some of our competitors aren't either.
Yep.
We know that this Mario Party game showed up with a competitor's sticker on it, so it had gotten sold once already in town. So that was kind of a bummer, but we've since helped educate them as well that, hey, just to look out for these things too. So
that's great.
That whole community aspect of it.
All right, so getting away from pirated cartridges versus real cartridges, there are a couple other pieces of technology that you kind of rely on here, right, to get these old school consoles back into modern day TVs and let us all enjoy that. So what do you have here for us? Yeah,
so that's a great segue because, when you try to plug in your system, older systems into these TVs, you'll find that sometimes the connections don't even exist anymore. And so thanks to the homebrew community and that retro community, there's people that are working to better deal with that. And so this is the GameCube HDMI adapter. It's running from the component slot, so you'd have to have a first generation GameCube to have access to that slot, but then it converts it to a mini HDMI and gives you that 480p signal for high resolution scaling. So
excellent.
It's a very simple device, 3D printed, and it's got a little circuit board in there that converts it. So
if you've got an old GameCube that you've been wishing you could play, but your cable's shot or your TV doesn't have those, one of those things is possible. Okay, good to know. And what else do you rely on here?
Yeah, so with that HD stuff and that HDMI technology, we want to be able to connect our regular Nintendo, Super Nintendo to these newer TVs as well. And so we run what's called a FrameMeister, and this is the XRGB Mini, which sadly is actually being discontinued because the chipset's no longer being produced. But they are working on a newer model that will be an updated chipset that will supposedly perform the same and stuff like that. But what's really important about why this makes that picture look so good is in relation to what's called RGB. And RGB is the video signal, red, green, blue, and a fourth sync signal. And so in America, we are used to shoveling all that data down the yellow wire of our red, white, yellow composite connections. Or with the RF coax connections, you're shoveling that with the audio down one. So it's a really dirty signal. So we run the Japanese version of SCART, which is the European standard that they had, where it's individual pins for those different signals. And that goes into the FrameMeister that then converts that to the HDMI signal. And you get a really nice, clean, upscaled video for it. And what's cool about the FrameMeister is you can also fake scan lines on your old games, which makes it look like the old CRT. And some people like it, some people don't, but I personally think that it creates a sharper image and a better color contrast.
That's like introducing record pops to modern music. Just giving you a little bit of that old school feel. Well, that's really cool. And I'm looking forward to seeing, what that FrameMeister does with some of these old games. It'd be really cool too, because you do have an old CRT TV here, so you can see some of what the old games look like compared to what they look like through the FrameMeister. So I think that's very cool. Okay, so we've got these pieces of equipment here that let us enjoy our old school games again, but they do come at a price. So the GameCube adapter is? It's
$100 for the adapter, but that's comparing to buying $200 component cables on eBay.
Which is crazy. We talked about that in the previous episode with Cassidy here too. That the component cables are $200 now because you can't find them.
They were only Nintendo made, so there's no third-party support for them. So.
And where would somebody get something like this?
So we are using a seller who goes by the name of Zelda X Pro. And so he has a website that you can find him on, and we share that with our social media as well. That if you want this, you can find it there, and you'll get that at a bit of a discount. $100 versus $200.
Sure.
But yeah, so it's he made it himself, and this is actually his 3.0 model. So it's well vetted and it's secure and not going to damage your equipment, kind of thing.
Right on. And the FrameMeister, this looks like a little more substantial piece of equipment.
So the FrameMeisters are a little bit spendier. With cables, it runs about $500. Which is one of those things that, if you have a TV that has the ability to convert a composite signal, or you have cheaper equipment to do composite upscaling, it'll do an okay job, but you'll remember that it looked better back then. And so it's like, we can offer something unique that you couldn't get at home here with the FrameMeisters. So you
could pay $500 for your FrameMeister, or you could buy a new PlayStation 4 for about that price. If you're really into those vintage games, or better option might just be to come back down to your store, right? Because you've got these all over.
Yep, we
on
have
all the
7 of the
systems, yep.
units, 7 units, and then we have the TV and the games and the system. So usually if you want to play Chrono Trigger, for instance, you're going to be running upwards of $1,000 to finally get to be able to play that with a FrameMeister.
Wow.
So.
That's it. That's it for this episode at Replay Games, talking about some of the gadgets that Cassidy uses here. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you keep checking back, liking, subscribing, telling your friends, all of that stuff, because we're going to do a lot more podcasts with a lot more games, gadgets, and of course guests. So until next time, I'm Brian Crommett. This is G3. Game on.